All right, so you guys requested a deep dive on the 1953 coup in Iran.
Oh, yeah,
And wow, this one's got it all.
it
We're
does.
talking Cold War intrigue,
Espionage.
betrayal, oil, and a whole lot of power plays.
Definitely.
To help us unpack this wild ride,
Hmm.
we'll be using excerpts from the podcast American Scandal.
Great podcast.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
So strap in, get ready for some serious cloak and dagger action as we try to answer the question, was this intervention in Iran
Yeah.
a necessary move against communism? Or was it just a plain power grab disguised as, like Cold War strategy?
Oh, you power grab. Yeah.
Yeah, so to even start to answer that, we need to set the scene.
Right. Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
paint me a picture of Iran in the early 1950s.
Okay, so picture this. Iran, in the early 50s.
Okay.
It's a brand new democracy.
Okay.
Full of, like energy, optimism, the whole deal.
Right, that fresh new democracy smell.
Exactly. But also, it's facing its challenges,
Yeah.
corruption, trying to shake off the legacy of British control,
Yeah, especially over their oil, right?
especially over the oil. Yeah.
Which brings us to,
Mosaddegh.
yes, Mohammad Mosaddegh.
Yeah, the prime minister.
Now, this guy was wildly popular, right?
Oh, incredibly. He really connected with the people,
Yeah.
especially on that whole nationalizing the oil industry thing.
Right, because he saw that as the path to true independence.
Exactly. Control their resources.
Control their destiny.
Yeah, control their own thing.
Okay, so we've got Mosaddegh, super popular, wants to take control of Iranian oil,
Yeah,
which, of course, the British are not thrilled about.
not at all.
And what about the Shah? Where does he fit into all of this?
Ah, the Shah.
Yeah.
He's in a tricky spot.
Right, because he's caught between his people and these, foreign powers.
Exactly. And he's got to, maintain his own power, too.
Right, of course, it's a power struggle after all.
Exactly.
So you've got all these competing interests.
Yeah, for sure.
You've got Mosaddegh, you've got the Shah, and then you've got the British.
Don't forget all the different groups within Iran, too.
Oh, right.
It's not just one homogenous group.
Yeah.
You've got religious leaders, landowners, military figures.
Oh, wow. It sounds like a recipe for, political chaos.
Oh, absolutely. It was a powder keg.
Okay, so the British are, obviously not happy about this whole nationalization thing.
Right.
What did they do?
Well, at first, they tried everything to, undermine Mosaddegh,
Okay.
sanctions, political pressure, you name it.
But he was pretty tough, huh?
Oh, super resilient. He had the backing of the people.
Yeah, he had the street.
Exactly.
So when that didn't work, they turned to
Well, to their friends across the pond.
the Americans.
The Americans, yes.
And how did they sell them on this whole intervention idea?
Well, they played the Cold War card.
Ah, yes, the C word.
The C word, exactly.
So they basically said, look, if we don't step in, Iran's going to go communist.
Yep, straight into the Soviet Union's arms.
Which, in the 1950s, that was the ultimate fear, right?
Yeah. The domino effect.
Right. One falls, they all fall.
Exactly.
So how did the Americans react to this? Were they immediately yeah, let's go topple a government?
Not quite. At first, there was some hesitation,
Okay.
especially from guys like H. Freeman Matthews.
Who was that?
He was a diplomat,
Okay.
a really experienced one. He
Yeah.
was, he understood the risks.
Right, because a coup is a risky move.
Oh, yeah, it could backfire big time.
Damage relations, create even more instability.
Exactly, all of that.
So it sounds like there was a real debate within the U.S. government about whether to get involved in Iran.
Definitely, a real tug of war.
On one side, you've got the cautious diplomats,
All right.
and on the other,
You've got the hardcore anti-communists.
and this is where the Eisenhower administration comes in, right?
Yep, that's when things start to shift.
Because Eisenhower himself, he was a general.
Mhm.
He knew the costs of war,
Yeah, he wasn't eager to jump into another conflict.
but he had some pretty influential figures in his cabinet.
Oh, yeah, guys like John Foster Dulles,
The Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, right?
Ellen Dulles.
Alan Dulles, head of the CIA.
Yeah, the Dulles brothers. Now, these guys were die-hard anti-communists.
Oh,
right?
yeah. They saw reds under every bed.
Okay, so how did they manage to, persuade Eisenhower to take action in Iran?
Well, John Foster Dulles, he was a master persuader.
Okay.
He really hammered home that idea that Iran was teetering on the brink
Of going communist.
of very communist. Yeah.
And, in the context of the Cold War, that fear was palpable.
Oh, absolutely.
So it sounds like the fear of communism, whether it was justified or not,
Right.
really ended up being the driving force behind the U.S. decision to back the coup.
Yeah, it definitely tipped the scales.
So what happened next? Did they just send in the Marines?
Not quite. This is where things get even more like sneaky and cloak and dagger
Oh, I
now.
love it when it gets sneaky.
I know, right?
Okay, so tell me more.
Well, even before Eisenhower gave the final go-ahead,
Okay.
the CIA was already laying the groundwork.
For the coup?
Now, the coup, yeah, they had this operation codenamed Operation Ajax.
Operation Ajax. Okay, I'm intrigued.
And get this, the guy they sent in to lead the whole thing was Kermit Roosevelt Jr.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah,
Kermit Roosevelt Jr., like as in,
Teddy Roosevelt's grandson.
you're kidding?
Nope, the one and only.
Wow. So Teddy Roosevelt's grandson ends up leading a covert operation to overthrow a government in Iran.
It's crazy, right?
It's like something out of a movie.
Yeah, I know, truth is stranger than fiction.
So what was his mission exactly? Like, what was he supposed to do?
He was basically the point man,
Okay.
working with British intelligence to, orchestrate the whole thing.
Wow, talk about pressure.
Oh, yeah. Imagine the weight on his shoulders.
And was Eisenhower even fully on board at this point?
That's the thing. It's a little murky.
Murky how?
Well, the CIA was already making moves, even while Eisenhower was still weighing the pros and cons.
So it sounds like there was a bit of a, shall we say, disconnect between what the CIA was doing and what the president had actually authorized.
You could say that.
Interesting. So while all of this is going on, did they have anyone in mind to, like, replace Mossadegh?
Oh, yeah. They had their guy.
Okay, who was it?
A retired military officer, Fazlollah Zahedi.
Zahedi. Okay, and what was his deal? Why him?
Well, he was a staunch opponent of Mossadegh.
Okay.
And crucially, he was pro-Shah.
Ah, so he was someone they thought they could control.
Exactly, someone who would play ball.
But wait, didn't Zahedi have kind of a colorful past?
Oh, yeah, he was known for, using a heavy hand.
Okay, so not exactly a poster child for democracy,
Not exactly.
but for the Americans and the British, he was the perfect pawn, right?
Absolutely. He fit the bill perfectly.
All right, so they've got their man.
Mm-hmm.
They've got their operation.
Operation Ajax.
Operation Ajax, right. But how exactly were they planning to pull this off? Did they just, like, roll tanks into Tehran and, storm the palace?
Oh, no, it was much more subtle than that.
Really?
This is where the CIA's expertise in psychological warfare came into play.
Okay, now you're talking.
They were masters of manipulation.
Oh, this is going to be good.
It is. It's a wild story.
All right, so spill the beans. How do you overthrow a government with psychology?
Well, they had a whole multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
First, they used propaganda.
Propaganda, how so?
They bribed journalists,
Yep.
planted stories, spread rumors, the whole 9 yards.
So they were basically controlling the narrative.
Exactly, controlling the information people had access to.
Which back then, that was mainly newspapers, right?
Yeah, that was the main source of news.
So if you controlled the newspapers,
You controlled public opinion.
it's kind of scary how effective that can be.
It's powerful stuff.
But they didn't stop there, did they?
Oh, no, they had a whole bag of tricks.
Okay, what else did they do?
They bribed government officials,
Go ahead.
military officers, anyone they could turn against Mossadegh.
Wow, it sounds like they were creating this whole atmosphere of, like, paranoia and distrust.
Exactly, turning everyone against each other.
And on top of that,
He staged riots.
Riots, seriously.
Yeah, they would pay people to, cause chaos in the streets.
So it would look like Mosaddegh had lost control.
Exactly, like the country was on the verge of collapse.
So they were basically manufacturing a crisis.
They were, and it worked like a charm.
Man, this is some next level stuff.
It is. It's a masterclass in manipulation.
And it all culminated in,
Well, the murder of Mahmoud Afshartus.
who was that?
He was Mossadegh's police chief.
Okay.
And get this, his relative.
Really?
Yeah, so it was a huge blow, both personally and politically.
Wow. And was the CIA directly involved in this murder?
It's never been definitively proven,
Okay.
but many believe they were at least indirectly responsible.
Okay, so, they may not have pulled the trigger themselves, but they created the environment where something like this could happen.
Exactly, they set the stage.
And this assassination, this was a turning point, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, it played right into the Dulles brothers' hands.
How so?
Well, they used it to pressure Eisenhower even harder,
Okay.
saying, look, Iran's descending into chaos. We need to act now.
And Eisenhower, being the cold warrior that he was,
Right.
he was finally swayed.
He was. The assassination pushed him over the edge.
And that, my friend,
Yeah.
is how the coup got the green light.
It's a chilling story, isn't it?
Chillin'. Yeah, and we're just getting started.
Oh, yeah. Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride.
All right, so next time we'll dig into the actual execution of the coup,
Hmm.
the aftermath, and the lasting legacy of this event.
It's a story that's still unfolding today.
Absolutely, and it's one we can't afford to ignore.
Couldn't agree more.
So join us next time as we continue our deep dive into the 1953 coup in Iran.
See that?
Okay, so last time we left off with the CIA getting the green light for this audacious coup in Iran.
Operation Ajax, one of their most controversial operations for sure.
Yeah, and they were using some pretty, let's say, creative tactics.
Psychological warfare, it's all about manipulating perceptions, creating chaos, that kind of thing.
So walk me through it. How did they actually put this plan into action?
Well, first, they had to make Mosaddegh look bad, right? Discredit him in the eyes of the people.
Okay, so how'd they do that?
Propaganda, straight up. They bribed journalists, planted stories in the newspapers.
Wow, fake news 1950 style.
Exactly. And back then, newspapers were everything. People relied on them for information.
Right, no internet, no social media.
So whoever controlled the newspapers controlled the narrative.
And the CIA was really good at that, huh?
Oh, yeah, they were masters of spinning the story, making Mosaddegh look weak, incompetent, even dangerous.
And the people bought it.
Well, yeah, if you keep hearing the same message over and over, it starts to sink in, right?
Right, especially if you don't have access to other sources of information.
Exactly. So they were planting these seeds of doubt, making people question Mossadegh's leadership.
But they didn't just stop at propaganda, did they?
Oh, no, they had to stir the pot even more.
How so?
Bribes. They started bribing government officials, military officers, anyone who could help them undermine Mosaddegh from within.
So they're playing both sides, the media and the government.
Yep. Classic divide and conquer strategy. Create chaos, turn people against each other, make it look like Mossadegh's lost control.
It's pretty Machiavellian when you think about it.
It is very calculated, very cynical.
And then on top of all that,
They staged riots.
riots, really, like fake riots.
Well, they would pay people to, go out into the streets, cause trouble, make it look like there was widespread unrest.
So they were creating this whole spectacle of chaos and violence.
Exactly. They wanted to create the impression that Iran was on the brink of collapse, that only the Shah could restore order.
Wow, it's like they were writing the script for a disaster movie.
They were, and they were the directors, orchestrating every move, pulling the strings from behind the scenes.
And the goal of all of this was to
make the Iranian people desperate for a change, to make them long for the stability and security that they thought the Shah could provide.
It's like they were creating the problem and then offering themselves as the solution.
Exactly. Classic problem, reaction, solution strategy.
And of course, the murder of Mossadegh's police chief played right into their hands.
Oh, yeah. That was a huge turning point. It created even more fear and uncertainty, made people think that things were spiraling out of control.
And that's when Eisenhower finally gave the go-ahead for the coup, right?
Yeah, the Dels brothers used that assassination to their advantage. They said, look, this is proof that Mossadegh can't handle the situation. We need to act now.
And Eisenhower, being the staunch anti-communist that he was, he bought it.
He did. He saw it as a necessary evil, a way to prevent Iran from falling into the Soviet sphere of influence.
So they had their justification. They had their plan. They had their man on the inside. What happened next?
Well, that's when the real action began. The CIA started putting their plan into motion, mobilizing their assets, getting ready to topple the government.
This is where it gets really exciting. How did they actually pull off the coup? What happened in those final days leading up to Mossadegh's arrest?
Well, imagine this. Tehran, August 1953. The tension is palpable. There are rumors swirling everywhere. People are whispering in the streets.
It sounds like a scene straight out of a spy thriller.
It was, absolutely. The CIA had been working tirelessly, spreading their propaganda, bribing officials, stirring up unrest, and now it was time to make their move.
So what did they do? Did they storm government buildings, take over the radio stations?
It was more subtle than that. They started by spreading rumors that Mosaddegh was planning to dissolve the parliament, that he was going to declare himself dictator.
So they were playing on people's fears of authoritarianism.
Exactly. They were exploiting the very anxieties that they had helped to create.
And did it work?
Oh, yeah. People started to panic. They were afraid of what Mosaddegh might do. They wanted stability. They wanted order.
And who did they turn to?
The Shah, of course. He was the only one who could supposedly save them from this supposed tyranny.
So the CIA had successfully manipulated public opinion, created this whole narrative that Mossadegh was the bad guy, the threat to their freedom.
And they did it all without firing a single shot, at least not directly.
What do you mean?
Well, they did orchestrate some violence. They paid mobs to attack Mossadegh's supporters to create chaos and fear in the streets.
So they were using violence indirectly to achieve their political goals.
Exactly. They were creating a climate of instability and fear, making people believe that Iran was on the verge of anarchy.
And in the midst of all this chaos, they launched their final move.
Yes. On August 19th, they staged a military coup.
Wow, so it all came down to a military takeover. How did that play out?
Well, they had bribed key military commanders, and with their help, they were able to quickly seize control of key government buildings and communication centers.
So they had the military on their side.
They did, and once they had the guns, the rest was pretty much a foregone conclusion.
And what about Mosaddegh? What happened to him?
He was arrested and put on trial for treason.
Treason. For trying to nationalize his own country's resources.
That was the charge, yes. And of course, the trial was a sham.
A show trial orchestrated by the CIA.
Exactly. The outcome was predetermined. Mossadegh was found guilty and sentenced to house arrest.
And just like that, a democratically elected leader was overthrown, replaced by...
Fazlollah Sahedi, their hand-picked puppet, he became the new prime minister, and the Shah returned from his brief exile and triumph.
So the CIA got what they wanted. They installed a pro-Western leader, secured access to Iranian oil, and supposedly contained the spread of communism. A victory for the West, right?
Well, that's what they thought at the time. But as we know, the story doesn't end there.
Right, because the 1953 coup had some pretty devastating long-term consequences, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It sowed the seeds of resentment and distrust that would eventually lead to the 1979 revolution, the rise of the Islamic Republic, and decades of hostility between Iran and the West.
It's incredible how this one event, this coup, orchestrated by the CIA, could have such far-reaching implications.
It's a stark reminder that actions have consequences, sometimes unintended and unforeseen, and that interfering in other countries' affairs, even with the best of intentions, can backfire in spectacularly disastrous ways.
It's a lesson we seem to have to keep learning over and over again.
Sadly, yes.
You know, it's really kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
What's that?
How this one event, this coup, back in 1953,
Yeah.
it's still shaping things today.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Iran's relationship with the West, the whole Middle East, it's crazy.
It really makes you wonder, what if things had gone differently?
Oh, yeah, that what-if game.
What if Mossadegh had stayed in power?
Yeah, what if the U.S. had just, stayed out of it?
It's impossible to know for sure, but
So it's fun to think about.
it is. It's a thought experiment.
Yeah, like a historical choose-your-own-adventure.
Totally.
But even though we can't change the past,
Right.
we can definitely learn from it.
Absolutely. That's the point of all this.
And this coup, man, it's got so many lessons packed into it.
It does, about the whole Cold War mindset
Yeah, that fear of communism, it drove so many decisions.
and the limits of intervention, thinking you can just go in and fix another country's problems.
Right, because it usually just makes things worse.
Yeah, more often than not.
And I think one of the biggest lessons for me is
What's that?
just how important it is to, understand other cultures.
Oh, yeah, totally.
To really try to see the world through their eyes.
Empathy, perspective taking, all of that.
Yeah, because if the U.S. had maybe had a better understanding of Iran back then,
Mm-hmm.
things might have played out differently.
It's possible.
And what's so wild is that this coup, it's not just a history book thing.
Right.
It's still so relevant today.
It is. You see it mentioned everywhere.
In the news, political speeches.
Pop culture, even.
It's like this ghost that keeps coming back to haunt us.
And for a lot of Iranians, it's not just a ghost, it's a living memory.
Right. It's a wound that hasn't healed.
Exactly. And that resentment, that distrust, it's still there.
And it just goes to show that actions have consequences.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Things we do today, they can have ripple effects for generations.
They really can. That's the butterfly effect in action.
That's a sobering thought.
It is, but it's also empowering.
How so?
Because it means we have the power to shape the future.
Right. To learn from the mistakes of the past and, try to do better.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the 1953 coup in Iran,
Mm-hmm.
what's the one thing you really want our listeners to walk away with?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that this coup, it wasn't just some random event in the past.
Okay.
It was a turning point, a fork in the road, and the repercussions are still being felt today.
Yeah, it's a story that's still unfolding.
Exactly, and it's a story that forces us to ask some tough questions.
Like what?
About the use of power, the dangers of intervention, and the importance of understanding other cultures.
And ultimately, it's a story about the importance of history itself.
Oh, definitely.
not just as some dry collection of facts and dates,
Right.
but as a living, breathing thing that shapes who we are.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note,
Yeah.
that's our deep dive into the 1953 coup in Iran.
Hope you all learned something.
Yeah, and we encourage you to, keep exploring this event,
Yeah.
Do your own research.
Definitely read different perspectives, challenge your own assumptions.
That's how we learn and grow.
Exactly.
All right, thanks for joining us on this historical journey.
Until next time.